I think what I'm guilty of is treating our democracy like it is so set in stone that it can never be threatened.
Yes.
And I learned a big lesson. Our democracy is only here because we've cared for it and because of our attitudes towards it.
Mm-hmm.
It's fragile, just like any bond in a relationship is a fragile bond.
It starts right here, deep in your heart. Start right here. Oh, that's where it starts. Right here. We look to your heart. It's always and only starting right here.
Thom Rutledge and Dr. Alan Berger bring over 90 years of clinical experience to this important podcast, and they offer you a guarantee. You will gain something of personal value from each episode. And now, what matters most.
It starts right here. Start right here.
Welcome back to Start Right Here. Not over there, not right here. Start right here. I'm Thom Rutledge. I'm with my partner in crime, my good friend and better friend since all of this last year of COVID isolation in a community has been going on, because we've just been spending a lot of time together. Dr. Alan Berger.
Yeah, it's great. How you doing, Thom? It's good to see you again. We've had quite a week. This has been quite a week.
This has been a week that is one of those weeks that you think, you think I never thought this would happen. It's I'll tell you what it brought me back to, if it's okay for me just to jump in here and
yes, let's do
about
it.
This is like my book that was published with HarperCollins came out. It's called Embracing Fear. We were in the final edits when the 9/11 attack happened, and so here we have a book about fear. Everything becomes about fear, and we're getting, so we and I loved working with this publishing company and this particular editor. So we had a decision to make. We had do we want to go back in and revise this book so that it is a book that directly addresses all of this, because we were talking about at the very beginning of my book about fear is we're not just talking about gigantic fears, we're talking about worries and anxieties and all this other stuff, and all of a sudden, when you hear one loud sound, it's like it drowns out all the others. So nobody was thinking in terms of worries, and nobody was. You remember that in therapy, when for quite a long time, it was. I mean, at least 3 weeks, I would think. People who even brought up their own personal stuff brought it up with guilt, because they felt like they shouldn't have any problems because of all this other stuff that was happening, but. We ultimately, and I'm glad we did, decided not to make this a 9/11 book, basically, but we did need to go back in and put the context of that in there. So we did go back and make some changes to talk about that. But the thing that I had not anticipated at the time was it became a part of the publicity for the book, because I was on Fox News before Fox News had the reputation it has now. I was on Fox and Friends, actually, talking about terrorism and how you deal with Tom Ridge, the Homeland Security guy, was right after me, and we talked about all this stuff, and we really got into some of the first times I was thinking in terms of not just the mental health of our individual selves, but the mental health of us as in this. I thought of it in terms of community before, but as a nation, in that case, it's like, we were having a mental health crisis as a nation. And so fast forward to now, I think we've been having quite a long drawn out problem with mental health issues as a nation. And I don't mean crazy. I mean, a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, and needing to understand what I guess the main thing I want to talk about is the very first part of my book, Embracing Fear. I talk about how important it is to tell the difference between healthy fear and neurotic fear. And we've touched on this with different language before, but it's because the language I use in the book is because healthy fear is our ally. It's not just something that's okay. It's like, no, this is a part of our inner guidance, when we have this. And so as we look back at this week, to catch back up where you were, we look back at this week and we watch what we watched in Washington, D.C., it's like, if people are afraid, when you're scared, when you see that, that's healthy. We should be afraid, and we should not, and we have to watch out for the human ability and the tendency to habituate everything and to make it okay. It's like, it's not okay. We need to be, this is just like having, if we were likening it to a family, it's like, and I'm not talking about just individuals, but just the whole system. It's like having, an out of control addict or bipolar person in the family, and everybody is just adjusting around it, and nobody's going to do anything about it. And everybody says, let's just try to be as quiet as we can, and maybe it'll get better. And I think we're past that place as a nation, but I also want to be sure that we keep, I think, bringing it up and mentioning it to the idea that the healthy fear is a wake up call for us. We need to listen to that. And it's like, the neurotic fear is something we don't want to be in charge of us. We want it, that will stop us. Healthy fear will propel us forward. That made a little bit more sense in my head before I said it, but did that make sense?
A lot of sense. Yeah.
Okay.
Look, the distinction I make, which is along the same lines that you're making, is, look, fear is when there is an actual threat in reality.
Yeah.
So right now, we have not experienced a threat to our democracy as great as we've recently experienced. I mean, that's the bottom line. That's the very fabric of our country.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love about this country is our democracy.
Yes.
I mean, I love this country. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else in the world. And I saw it being incredibly threatened. I saw things that you would have never imagined happening on our streets and in our capital. Mm-hmm. So yes, I felt fear. There was an insurrection. There was an attempt to change the will of our nation in terms of the voting process and stuff like that, and that's the heart of democracy.
Right. There was a straight on attack on our capital, on our government,
and it was encouraged by the President of the United States and all of his cronies. I mean, it was an incredible thing, and and so look, that is a reality. Now, what I said, there's a difference. Anxiety is when you fantasize about what's going to happen. And see, this is where it's a real challenge to keep our focus on the objective part of this, what's real, and because this is where now mental health comes in. So we have a fear here. There was a threat, and it's a real thing, and it's not over. If you hear the feedback that we're getting from organizations like Twitter, and they look at the kind of chatter that's taking place, which is a legitimate, any intelligence organization is going to say one way they can determine what's going to happen is look what kind of chatter is taking place on social media around stuff like this. There's a lot of chatter going on that we haven't seen the last of this attack on our capital and our government. We got the inauguration coming up here in a couple weeks. I mean, to me, that would be an incredible, time for them to try something. I mean, I think incredible meaning they could see that as an incredible opportunity to get a lot of press, to get a lot of, because that's part of this thing too. You just saw the grandstanding that was taking place as people were entering into that Capitol building.
Yep. Oh yeah, absolutely. And so going back, and when I go back, when I'm sitting here looking at a copy of the Embracing Fear book, the subtitle that is my wonderful editor Gideon Wild came up with is how to turn what scares us into our greatest gift.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that because it feels so counterintuitive. Yeah. But it is absolutely, fear can bring us to that great gift. And because it brings us to not only, I mean, in the moment it's action, but I think what we're dealing with now is a place of awakening.
Yes.
And the thing I wrote recently and put out here and there is there's several versions of it now that I've written, but it's like it just begins by our resolution as a nation needs to be that we need to promise ourselves and each other that we're never going to let our government operate unsupervised again. Because that's how this happens.
Yes.
Is we feel better because it's okay, or our guys are in charge, so we're going to be okay. I hope this is one of the things that, Patrick, that you are an inspiration to me about this, because your clarity about your anxiety about this stuff is so much a part of my enlightenment about it too. Is the idea is like, yes, and it's not that Alan and I, we're not done. We're old, but we ain't that old. But I look at the younger people and go like, no, if you guys can keep getting this idea that you know, it's like, trust people, but don't trust them blindly. You know, and that means your own people too, not just the other side.
I'm very interested. The gift that your fear gives you, is it that clarity? Is clarity the gift?
I think there's lots of things. I think it gives you the gift of that. It also gives you the gift of courage, because the idea is that we have a choice when we feel fear, and it is, we can. You know, even with a healthy fear, even with a fear that is factual, we can cycle back into that neurotic fear that Alan's describing. And just, you know, I mean, one of the reasons I wrote about fear is the same reason I wrote about self-forgiveness and should monsters in our heads, because these were problems that have been problems in my life. I grew up as I realized in therapy, I was a frightened man. I was a frightened little boy. I lived from fear. And so the idea is, I want to be aware of my fear. Fear is not a bad thing. It's a good thing, but it's like, I can choose courage. And see, I really came down to understanding after spending the time writing this book. And I think it's one of those things, you know, Alan, you get this too. It's like, you spend as much time as you do with a subject writing a book. Some of the best stuff you have about it is not in the book because you thought of it afterwards.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, because you spent the time.
Let me say something about the gift part of this, because I think it's such an important thing. So look, one of the gifts is that you get grounded when you confront a situation like with 9/11. One of the things we realized was that it was naive to think that someone could hijack a plane and not use it as a weapon. It was done in World War II, the kamikazes, right? Mm-hmm. And that was a mind blower, because you weren't supposed to get in a plane and deliberately crash it into a ship as a weapon and turn it into a missile, essentially, mm-hmm. right? And it blew the military minds, because this was out of the box thinking, you know, that they did not imagine this was going to take place. And it was a terrifying situation, because when you got somebody who's willing to sacrifice their life and not care about their life in order to attack your ship, and that's what we saw going on. And we also saw it on the troops on the ground. There were a lot of suicide bombers. They weren't called suicide bombers at that point in time, but a lot of people Japanese were willing to sacrifice themselves and you know, crawl underneath a U.S. tank with explosive strap and blow themselves up to blow up the tank. Mm-hmm. Now that stuff was not like, we couldn't wrap our minds about it, because, you know, I'm Sergeant Berger and Private Tom's over there. I'm going to say, Tom, I want you to strap these explosives to you and go crawl underneath. Tom says, yeah, right. That's going to happen, Berger. I mean, he's on it. I mean, our mentality won't let us wrap our heads around that kind of a thing, but that doesn't mean people aren't going to do it.
Okay, but go back, don't. I'm with you all there. Go back to the grounded part, though, because
so the grounded part is, so here's the grounded part. So what we learned here is that I think what I'm guilty of is treating our democracy like it is so set in stone that it can never be threatened.
Yes.
And I learned a big lesson. Our democracy is only here because we've cared for it and because of our attitudes towards it. Mm-hmm. it's fragile, just like any bond in a relationship is a fragile bond. And we have a fragile bond to that, much more fragile than I've ever imagined.
Right. And in terms of, Patrick, back to what you're saying, I think we've also, through this election, I think we've seen, I mean, I just pardon the metaphor. I'm not trying to make light of any of this, but I just watched my Titans football team lose a very close game. It's like, we really pulled this one out. And it's really important to realize it's not a football game, and that, like you said, we're not done, and we're not done after inauguration. It's like but we did get to see the gift. I mean, if you want to call it the gift of Trump, is he is one of the, if we will make it so, this is what I believe about fear. It's our choice. If we will make it so, the gift of Trump is that he can be one of the greatest awakenings, of all time, to wake us up to all of this stuff. It's like, right. No, actually, there's lots and lots of people, lots of moving parts, and lots of bad folks involved in all this stuff. But from that very center of that man, what we've seen is that so much damage, so much ripple effect of damage can be done. And it's like, we have awakened. We never need to, we get to sleep, but we need to take turns on stand and watch. It's like, we don't need, we took it for granted, is what you said. And I think that's one of the lessons that we have at this point. And I think
that's right. And see, and I think the other thing we're learning, for me, this is a gift, is it's around this issue of truth and how truth can be manipulated. Right. And what we saw here is that one of the things that Trump was uncanny at, the ability of taking the fear of a large portion of our populace and using that fear to manipulate them. Mm-hmm. This is how Hitler came into power in Germany. There's no, and many despots and tyrants have come into power along those lines. They say, if we don't, and that's the nationalism that starts to show up. If we don't take hold of this, you're going to lose your life. You're going to lose your life. And look, all of those folks that would jump off a cliff for him, they really believe it's a life and death issue for them.
Right.
I mean, I know some Republicans that say this is the end of democracy because Biden has been elected. Yep. I mean, instead of saying, my God, this is the salvation of democracy, they're thinking that in 4 years we're going to be a socialist country.
Right. Okay. Let me go back to this part. Let's go back to mental health for a second, because the other thing to pay attention to with that, because we've had this intensive workshop on narcissism in the most obvious way. And one of the things I've always told clients about trying to help them understand what a narcissist is a narcissist will do many things, but one of the things they're going to do is they're going to accuse you of doing exactly what they're doing. It would be like me telling you, God damn it, Alan, get your hair cut.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. It's like that. And they do it so powerfully.
Yes.
That I'm sitting there, I always tell people, because I'm always wear cowboy boots. I always tell
a good example, what they're going to accuse, let's say in this case, they're going to accuse this, Trump has accused everybody else of lying.
Yeah.
They're lying. And there's been and this is not coming from I'm not just pulling this out of my hat. People that have fact checked him, there's never been a president that's lied as much as Trump.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, yeah, and so what we have is
Pelosi gets it. She goes, he's projecting. I know. Pelosi understands the psychology of that dynamic very well, man.
Well, and there are offshoots to this conversation that I think you and I, because the subtitle you came up with for this thing is that the conversation is about what matters most is. I think we have a puzzle here, and we understand some of it, but how there can be so many, what I just refer to as, pardon me if this is offensive to somebody, otherwise intelligent human beings who buy this stuff. I have not figured out how to speak to those people yet. and we don't have to change everybody's mind, but we do need to get people who are amenable to change and who are amenable to growth, and how they're thinking and maturity, recovery, really what we talk about with emotional sobriety. We need to be able to not just dig in on one side and just play everything to win. We have to problem solve.
Yeah, how do we unlace that tribalism? You know, I mean, that's a question I ask myself.
That's a great way to say, how do we unlace the tribalism? I think what we need to, the fear should point us. Okay, we're going to stick to fear as a gift. The fear should point us to the right questions. And that's a beautiful question. It's like, there's no just one answer. And one of the things you can know you're in the wrong conversation if everybody just has the answer and we're arguing about which one's right. Yes. It's like, we have to have this conversation, and those questions are just tools that take us toward more understanding. The way we start with that is I write that question down. Look, absolutely.
What we're talking about here is a difficult process, because look, let me use this analogy for a minute. Okay. I don't think it's too far stretched or too far stretched. I mean, so you take someone who's been involved in a cult, and that this cult leader has been able to help people or convince people, influence people to believe a whole set of reality that has nothing to do with reality.
Right.
And if a family member goes ahead and is able to rescue a person from that cult before, let's say, they drink Kool-Aid or what. Now you got to understand, that guy that took his following down to Mexico convinced them all that they'd be better off to kill themselves, and they followed his direction.
Yep.
Now that level of obedience to where you're willing to drink Kool-Aid and give it to your kid that's poisoned and watch your child die. I mean, think about that for a minute. That's like,
it's analogous to our current.
Well, it's very analogous, because look, and these people really believed what they were being told. And this is the dilemma. See, what they think that is the threat out there in the world, right, twists everything around 100%. And it gives that person, in this case, the cult leader, so much power to manipulate their fear. They're stealing the election from you. They're stealing the country. They're stealing your democracy. I mean, and these people are patriotic, right?
Right.
You're taking away from me what is my God-given right.
Right.
See, that's how it gets wired in there. And so if let's say Thom was in a cult and he was my brother and you and I went and rescued him, and to deprogram him takes an incredible effort. I mean, we're not talking about deprogramming one person. We're talking about deprogramming 70 million people. I mean, how do we do that? How do we help people get grounded in and be able to see what the reality is again and get past this? I'll tell you, it's a very special thing to be a deprogrammer, and they're not all successful. We hear about the successful ones.
Right.
I mean, it's a remarkable thing, the mind, Patrick. It really is in terms of being able to help people, because for them, the reality that they're believing in is the reality, and they don't see it any other way. And then when you try to point it out, they say, well, see, they've got you fooled.
Right.
You're part of the deep state. They've fooled you. See, so you're in this dilemma of anything you say, if it goes contrary to what their belief is, what is going to be refuted.
Yeah. This I want to toss this piece in here too, just because there's a test question that I have been using now for some time, and it is basically to see if somebody can answer a hypothetical. Okay, so like let's say that you believe something that I consider absolutely ridiculous, Alan, and I say, well, let's say you believe everything about Trump is real, and I say to you, I want you to answer this hypothetical question. If you found out, if you discovered that Trump was not what you thought he was, that he was actually devious-minded and manipulative and dangerous man, would you then change your position? Okay, now that hypothetical question has only one answer. It's like, if you were to say to me, Thom, if I could convince you that Barack Obama was on his way to your house to kill you and your family, would you then change your mind about how you feel about Barack Obama? The answer is quickly and easily yes.
Yes.
The hypothetical is this. People who cannot answer the hypothetical are the people that are you're talking about are the people that are going to be hell to deprogram.
That's right.
They refuse to.
But let's look at it this way. So here's another way to throw it in, and maybe next time I'll try to dig this book out, because it was brilliant. It was called Scientist as Subject.
Okay.
So we're going to take this out of a political realm, and we're going to put it into the science realm right now, just to make this point.
Okay.
So it was by Dr. Mahoney. I can't remember his first name right now. Maybe it'll come to me as we go on. So what he did is he looked at science, because we all hold science as being this approach to life as being objectively based. Facts. We would all say scientists are based on fact and object. And he says we couldn't be more wrong than to think that way. He says scientists are susceptible to the same forces anybody else is. And he starts with saying, when people believed the earth was flat, and this was a worldwide global view, people would be.
They wouldn't have said global.
Well, they wouldn't have said global. But based on their perception of,
they would say this is just flat out the truth.
Flat out, it's a flat earth. It's a flat out truth. Okay. And no pun intended, right? So people that would have a different opinion would be jailed and killed. See, there's something about what happens and what his position was. And this guy, Thomas Kuhn, talked about the structure of scientific revolutions, right? He says what happens is once a paradigm takes place and it's widely accepted, for that paradigm to be changed, it has to go through a crisis. Yeah. And there has to be so much evidence that says this is not true that there's no way you can hold on to it. Because early on, when the evidence comes in, let's say I'm not scientific enough to understand a biological theoretical construct that we can use with this. But what he said is that early on, when some studies don't go according to the way they should go based on the theory, people just say, oh, they ignore it. They ignore what Thom was calling the information that doesn't fit with the current paradigm, right? So they say, oh, that's an anomaly. The study wasn't done well. They're just like now. People are saying that it was Antifa. They were dressed up in Trump outfits because they don't want to accept, because it would put them into this cognitive dissonance that just Thom was talking about. If they say, no, these were Trump people that were threatening your democracy, not other people. These were Trump. But no, we'll have to make them what we think is the threat. And that's the radical left, right? So they were all dressed up. And as Trump, they paraded themselves as Trump, and they were really Antifa. Now, that's what's going on now, because, see, that paradigm is being challenged. See, and that's what Thom was saying. The hypothetical is now they're starting to get some reality to this. Hey, wait a minute. Maybe you've been fooled. Maybe this guy's just about his power. He's not really interested in your freedom, because he was just telling you he was really the greatest threat to your freedom that we've ever had.
Right.
See, and that takes so much evidence and so much truth to change that paradigm. It's incredible.
Okay, so now I have no idea how this podcast is going to come off when somebody's listening to it, but it's like, it's all over the place, but every bit of it seems important to me. And one of the things you said is very much, I'm going to come back to our world for a moment. And that is and not just addiction, but addiction is the simplest one to track, but none of us, we don't get into recovery because we think it's a good idea. We get into recovery because we have crisis and big crisis. And it's like, and many of us have crisis after crisis after crisis, and it still doesn't take. And then and some people have crisis until it fucking kills them and they never make it. And it's like, and some people have a crisis, they get in and then they forget it and they go back. It's like, if we apply what we understand as mental health professionals, this is the awakening. What happens with recovery is the awakening is there. And then what do? It doesn't have to be 12-step, but you and I we're all focused in 12. We make a daily practice of something that is going to keep us in our awakening. To not drift back off to sleep, not hit the snooze button, not go back to sleep. I personally, I'm not trying to make this more complicated. I personally thought George W. Bush was our bottom. I thought we had hit the bottom, and I thought we were on our way back up. Massive relapse. It's like in this. So I think one of the things we need to realize is those paradigm shifts that you're talking about. And I wrote Thomas Kuhn's, I wrote that down, Mahoney, scientists as subject. I want to check this stuff out too, because it is paradigm shift that we need. Yeah. It is, we're not going to be able to shift all the way to, it's not reasonable, in my opinion, to shift to John Lennon's lyrics of Imagine, right. But those are a wonderful meditation as far as I'm concerned. No countries, no religion. It's like, and the one line in it that I think is ridiculous is, it's easy if you try. It's like, it's not easy. It's like, but we do have to understand, and we go back. This comes back to the fear thing too, Patrick, about where are the lessons. The gift is waking us up, realizing it's time for us to step up, be courageous, be awake, and realize this is not something we just fix one time. This is what we learn about recovery. This is something we begin a change that is going to be a change process for the rest of our lives. That not one of us who are in this process could have possibly predicted exactly who we are today when we started this. It's like, we need that for our nation, for our world, as outlandish as that may sound. That it's not a paradigm shift, it's paradigm shifts. Yes. In the plural that we need. That's right. And so I in this conversation, I'm going to say one of the gifts I'm getting from this is it is being in and continuing to be in this conversation with you two and with other people about this, and to work on communicating with other human beings about how to solve problems rather than who the fuck is right and who the fuck is wrong. Yeah. That we have to, that's where right. We got to go.
As soon as we get polarized on that, but and look at this is where it becomes a challenge, because what might be important to you may not be as important to me in terms of right. Security.
Value systems,
our value.
Yeah.
Talk about a value clarifications experience. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know some people that were so supportive of Trump because of his impact on the economy and lessening our dependence on nations like China in terms mm-hmm. of production and stuff like that. Now, personally, I think that we make ourselves vulnerable when we become too dependent on other countries. Mm-hmm. And especially in situations like this, like what we saw with the COVID stuff, when because of the falling out we had, China decided to not bring in a lot of personal protective equipment that we needed mm-hmm. because of the falling out they were having with Trump. Mm-hmm. Right. And so in one way, I understand that our dependence on another country can make us vulnerable for those things. And so, I think that we've got to find a balance on these things. But my point is, I don't want to get lost in the details of this, is my point is that what's going to make you feel secure may not make me feel secure.
Right.
And that becomes a big challenge here, because a lot of this stuff, what Freud knew what he was talking about when he said religion is the opiate for the masses. Now, why did he say that? Because a lot of people find, and understandably so, a lot of solace in religion. They say, my God, that there's some greater plan here for me, that there's life after death, and I'm going to go to a much better place, and all of these other ideas that if you're more of an existentialist, you can't find solace in. But all I'm saying is people gravitate towards that kind of security, towards wanting to feel that things will be okay for them. Now, back to what you were saying, Thom, about what can we do? Boy, it's a challenge, but I do think that there is something when you say, and I'm paraphrasing what you said, is that when we talk about raising people's level of consciousness, making people more aware of these kinds of issues, is that what are the forces driving me? What makes something important? And do I really get security by things out there, or do I have to think about security in a different kind of a way? That's the dialogue you and I have been trying to help with people, is that no matter what happens out there, you can be afraid, but you can still feel secure. Now, I learned that from the United States Marine Corps, believe it or not. They showed me that I could be in a situation that is life-threatening. There's real danger. There's bullets going over my head. And if I stay focused on what I can influence, I give myself the best chance of surviving in a situation like that. Now, that doesn't mean I'm in total control of the situation, because I'm not.
No, you just told the way the Marines do the Serenity Prayer, and it's right. Absolutely, it's the most powerful thing. It's like there is no ultimate safety. I mean, that's one of the things that
there isn't any.
That's
a problem, and I think that's where people get hung up, Thom.
They think they're going to, that's the thing about healthy fear and unhealthy fear. The idea that I'm going to be without fear. It's like, no, you're not. Not if you're paying attention.
That's right.
We need to listen.
Oh,
yes, Patrick.
For my own benefit, and hopefully some of the listeners, is on one of these days where it feels like the world's ending, how do you take care of yourselves?
Well, for me, it comes, and I sometimes think this may just be a matter of age too, that it is easier to do at this age than it would be at yours. In my life, it really has come down to self-respect and integrity. It's like, I'm as simplistic as I can make it is all kinds of shit can happen. And one day I'm not going to survive one day I won't survive that day. And what I want to be sure that I'm doing it every day of my life, being the best version of myself that I can be. And the only way I can do that on the day that I die is to be sure I do it every day. And it's like, I bring it back to me. How do I feel about being me? How do I feel about how I'm treating my wife? How do I feel about I have a friend who's just been diagnosed with cancer, and it's one of the reasons I ended up email to you guys recently, just adding, I love you, I love you guys, because those things are completely connected to my answer to that question. It's like, who am I? How am I doing with being me? I'm a hell of a lot better human being than I was. And to me, that's where I want to land in the midst of all the uncertainty, because the other shit is, uncertain.
Yeah. Well, I want to take a shot at what you're saying, Patrick, too. So here's where I think that one of the great things about this, what we call information revolution that's taking place, or that has taken place, is we have access to more information in the palm of our hands than any person at any other time in the history of mankind. It's a curse and a blessing, because what we call a here and there phenomena is greater now than ever before in life. See, before, before, let's say we had this ability to communicate the way we did and to find out what's going on, and like in Washington, D.C., let's say that we didn't have any of this stuff. Well, we'd be dependent on, let's say, the Pony Express bringing mail out here to California. By the time we found out about this, it would be 2-3 weeks later. It's no longer here and now thing. Now you could turn your TV on. You are right in the Capitol with those guys. It's a here and there that's happening here and now, but it's over there, right? You're not in that Capitol, but you are because of that here, because of what we can experience with technology. What do I do when I hear, let's say, an earthquake kills 5,000 people in Malaysia or something like that? What does that do for me? Well, that's more information and I can wrap my head around. You see what I mean? In some way, it's overwhelming. Now, where I don't get too hung up in that is to say, I come back to, is there an earthquake happening right here, right now? No, there's not. So I don't have to be worried about that earthquake over there. Now, it does say that there are earthquakes and terrible things can happen to people when these earthquakes happen. We've seen that in America. I mean, we've seen that in Northridge out here in California, those kinds of things. But here's the challenge. And I think that this is part of, what I hope Thom and I can do is pass on ways for you to keep your sanity during insane times. And there are ways to do that. Like I said to you, the Marine Corps helped me get grounded in what could I do to ensure my survival if I was in a firefight, if we were being attacked, if the enemy was shooting artillery at us or whatever it was. There were things that we could do to increase our. Now, could I control that whole situation? No. Here's some of what I try to do in this situation. First of all, I come back to right now. What does this mean to me at this particular moment? Well, it means to me at this moment that I need to pay attention to our, just what Thom was saying. I need to wake up and not assume our democracy is poured in concrete, that it's going to be now and forever, and that we don't have to take care of it. And we don't have to manage it. And we don't have to, the way you said it in the beginning, Thom, is that we can't just turn our blind eye and we got to pay attention to who we're, electing into these power positions and stuff, because there's a lot of power there, as we've seen.
And then we supervise them, by the way.
Well, that's what you called it, supervision.
Yeah. We're going to keep
an appropriate level of supervision.
Right.
See, now I can learn that. Now, all that does, though, is that right now, what happened there, other than I have that information, didn't change the fact that Cece had to go to the potty and I had to take her pants down and then wipe her butt after she was done. I mean, that still happened today. The same way it would have happened. Tom's still going down to the barn and feeding the horses.
Yeah.
That
I don't know if there's a book. It was actually, it's interesting because it's so relevant. I just now thought about it. It's one of those books you have on your shelf. I could take you to it right now, even though I haven't touched it in years. It's called New World, New Mind, and it's by Paul Ehrlich and Robert Ornstein. And it is an amazing life-altering book that I read whenever it came out, which was like over 20 years ago. But one point they make, Alan, is exactly the point you made, and that is that, and ultimately what they said is, and again, I don't remember their exact numbers here, but they said basically, you look at how much the world has changed in the last 50 years or 100 years, and then look at how the human brain how much the brain has evolved. It hasn't very much in those years. I mean, for tens of thousands of years, and so. They use the example of the bear at the door. If the bear is at the door, you react. It's like you do that. He says, and they weren't. This was even before all the social media stuff. They were just talking about television, and they said, so the bear is now on the television. Right now, the bear, it occurs to me, is in our pockets in the form of our phone. It's like, and what they were saying, that this is a great reminder, and maybe the best point we can make is we need to also be aware, as people who are self-caring human beings, is that our brains are reacting as if that bear is at our door. Yeah. And it's not.
Exactly right.
And it does, and it's not. We're making the point, I think, clearly, is that doesn't mean everything's fine. It just means it's a different level of response that is recalled. And one of the things I said to you to text not long ago, Patrick, was, and I think this is probably true for you, I think this is something that, and I don't mean this as an insult, that I think we have in common, is that when I can take something like this, it's something that's going on, it's freaky and weird and hard and scary, and I can turn it into something I can write about, it makes me feel so much better. Now, I don't know if that's just pacifying me, but I've always felt that way about mental health stuff too. If I can take my craziness and turn it into something that might be useful to somebody else, not only do I actually clarify my thinking by writing, because I do, I think by writing, it helps me do that, but I actually feel like I'm doing something. Being
in action,
in action. Well, and it feels like, and it also with writing, it feels like I'm doing something that is productive and potentially useful and helpful. And so that and that to me fits back into what Alan's talking about with groundedness. That is just, I never thought about it in that way, but writing grounds me.
That's right. Writing is a powerful grounding thing. And you know, look at, and you're right. They said that it was with the TV, and like you said, Tom, it's in our pocket now. More information,
there's a bear in my pocket.
And more information that was on the TV, because back then there was just 8 channels or 6 channels. I mean, I don't know how many channels are on my cable TV now.
Yeah.
But I mean, it goes up to 900 or something like that.
When we were kids, we wait for Walter Cronkite or Huntley and Brinkley to bring us the news for an hour every night. Everybody gathered, watched that. That's it. That's all you had.
Now you've got a streaming, your news is coming to you every minute if you want it.
And so we bring in what this Ornstein and Ehrlich are saying is, our brains are way overactivated.
They are so the American Psychological Association, and I want to keep this discussion going on one more week. So we'll kind of wrap it now and have a part 2 of it.
And we should I think we should solve all this in another week.
Well, I think by the next week we'll have the answers to all of this. But, look at what the American Psychological Association has come out recommending is limit your exposure. Start limiting your exposure. Once you hear what's going on, stop at that point in time. Don't continue, feeding yourself that information. Once you have the information, let yourself stop. Come back a day or so later or later on in that day, but don't continue to just sit there and get inundated with it. So that's one of the things that they're recommending is that we need to start to filter what we're exposing ourselves to, because it's not being done automatically anymore. Like Tom said, boy, we waited till the 6 o'clock news with Walter Cronkite, right? That's when we got the news. No, not anymore. You got the news coming in, and now look at the news, the possibilities of your news channels you got. So anyway,
the dynamic with JFK's assassination, right? You could probably remember that, and
I do very well.
You probably saw that on Cronkite, right? I mean, just
totally. And there was only and that was covered on every channel, but there was 8 channels. I mean, I can't remember how many there were, but there weren't 50 channels, and they were all pretty much saying the same thing. That's the other difference. Is now the amount of information you can get in the lack of any check in terms of the truth. You can go. There's podcasts that are nothing but conspiracy theories.
Right. Okay. I know we're wrapping up, but let me say this part out loud because I want you guys both to have it because this is there's just so much in this. It's amazing. I just wrote this down: managing the multitude as a topic for later. Okay, because I want to give just a brief. I want to say this, and then I'll turn this over for you to wrap us up here, Alan. But it's because in a very minor form, again, analogous to all we're talking about, but not at all what it is. I had a day that is a beautiful example of this. I am so aware these days of how I manage and maneuver around the various aspects of my personality, and how I can move out of certain moods and places when I'm there and don't need to be there. It's like, I won't go into all the details, but I'll give you the last example. The last example was I tried to delay our podcast today till 4 o'clock because I was really getting nervous about the Titans. Okay. Didn't get to you guys in time. Didn't get that done. So what I did was I left Dee Dee with the football game. I put my headphones on, went out with my dog, and I left the football game early. And because I knew I needed at least 30 minutes to manage myself, to get myself back into a different place of mindset, because I know I can't just move one place to the other. And so I realized today, and there's some other examples of that too, but the idea that we all have to become responsible for how to manage our own mindset and really mood and personality. And I'd like to talk about that a ways out now, but we'll definitely come back to this next.
Enough said.
Wow.
Enough said. That was the final word. This is like the final word that comes on after the Rachel Maddow show.
Lawrence O'Donnell. I love him.
You had the final word today, Tom.
Did you know that he wrote for what was the Martin Sheen president show?
West Wing.
Do you know that Lawrence O'Donnell wrote for that show?
I can imagine. He's quite bright, and he knows what goes on in the halls.
Hey, let's get Lawrence O'Donnell on our show.
I'd love it.
All right, let's do it.
Love it. Why not invite him? I mean,
let's do it. Well, let's do it, because I'm sure he can contribute to this conversation and help us be a little bit more sane. Okay.
What's the name of the? You said it was the Psychiatric Journal. Had the article.
American Psychological Association. I'll bring it in next week, and I'll try to find my books on the scientist is subject. I love that book. That book meant so much to me when I read it. It was incredible. I think it was, I want to say Robert Mahoney, but I'm not so sure that was his first name. But it was a brilliant, brilliant discussion. Are you more messed up at the end of our discussion, or how are you feeling with everything?
No, I feel a little bit better, and it's a lot, man. I'm still trying to put it all together into a narrative that will put me on a track with less pessimism. But this has helped for sure. Yeah.
Well, all pessimism isn't bad either. It's part of the conversation. Thank you, guys.
All right, you guys. Good job today.
All right.
It's a spiral, not a circle. Goes round, round, round. Look for solutions, be your own friend. Never say never in either direction. Look in the mirror, trust the reflection. Deep in your heart, start right here. That's where it starts.